Station 9 floated in the darkness of space like a city made of light. It was home to the Galactic Coalition Academy, a place where young cadets from dozens of different species came to learn and train together. Some had scales, some had fur, some had shells harder than steel, and some were human. Stood at attention near the main docking bay, wearing her cadet uniform. She was 22 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and brown eyes that always seemed to be watching everything. Today was an important day. The Dominion was sending a diplomatic ship and had been assigned to the security detail. She had read about the in her studies. They were apex predators, the most dangerous species in the known galaxy. They looked like massive wolves mixed with lions, but with 6 powerful limbs instead of 4. Their bodies were covered in dark fur that could shift colors based on their mood. Their claws carried venom that could kill most species in minutes, and their teeth could bite through metal. They had conquered dozens of worlds before joining the Galactic Coalition. They were warriors, they were hunters, and today they were bringing their children to the station. Watched as the ship connected to the docking port. The doors opened with a hiss of pressurized air. First came the guards, tall and terrifying, their eyes scanning every corner of the bay. Then came the ambassador, a massive male with silver streaks in his dark fur. He walked with the confidence of a creature that had never known fear. Behind him came 3 adult females, and around their legs 5 cubs tumbled and played. Felt her breath catch in her throat. The cubs were small, only reaching up to her waist. Their fur was softer than the adults, colored in shades of brown and gold. Their eyes were large and curious, looking at everything with wonder. They chirped and growled at each other, wrestling and chasing their own tails. They were thought absolutely adorable. She quickly pushed that thought away. She had read the warnings. Cubs were not pets, they were not safe. Even at this young age, their claws carried venom. When frightened or angry, they could enter what the reports called threat mode, a state of pure predatory aggression. Cubs in threat mode had killed trained soldiers. The ambassador approached the station commander, a tall creature named Director Al. They exchanged formal greetings while the other security cadets stood silently along the walls. "My children and their young ones will remain in the observation nursery during our discussions," the ambassador said. His voice was deep and rumbling like thunder in the distance. "I must warn your people. Do not approach the cubs. Do not make eye contact with them. Do not make sudden movements or loud sounds near them." Director Al nodded his large, triangular head. "We understand, Ambassador. Our cadets have been briefed on protocols." "Good," the ambassador's golden eyes swept across the room, landing briefly on. "A frightened cub is a killing cub, remember this." The diplomatic group moved deeper into the station. Was assigned to patrol the corridor outside the observation nursery, and she took her position without complaint. Through the large windows, she could watch the cubs playing inside. The nursery was a large room filled with soft platforms and climbing structures. The mothers sat together in one corner, talking in their rumbling language while keeping watchful eyes on their young ones. The cubs seemed happy, chasing each other around the room, pouncing on toys, and making sounds that ranged from cute chirps to tiny growls. Found herself smiling as she watched them. One cub, larger than the others with a distinctive gold stripe down his back, seemed to be the leader. He was bolder than his siblings, climbing higher, jumping farther, and always being the first to investigate anything new. When a cleaning drone entered the room, he was the first to approach it, sniffing it carefully before deciding it was boring. Hours passed. Shift was supposed to be quiet and uneventful. She walked her patrol route, checked the security panels, and watched the cubs through the window whenever she passed. She noticed things, small things. The cubs responded strongly to sounds. High-pitched noises made them excited. Low, rumbling sounds calmed them down. When one of the mothers hummed a deep, vibrating melody, all the cubs stopped playing and gathered around her, their eyes half closed with contentment. Filed this information away in her mind, without really knowing why. As the station's artificial night began, the lights in the corridors dimmed to a soft blue glow. Shift was ending soon. She made one last pass by the nursery window and saw that most of the cubs were sleeping in a pile near their mothers. Only the gold-striped leader was still awake, sitting alone by the window. He saw and tilted his head. Knew she should look away. The rules said no eye contact, but something in the cub's gaze held her. He did not look aggressive, he looked curious, maybe even lonely. She raised her hand slowly and pressed it against the glass. The cub watched her for a long moment. Then he lifted his own paw and pressed it against the glass on his side. Smiled, the cub's tail swished once, twice, and then he turned and padded back to join his sleeping family. She continued her patrol, her heart feeling strangely warm. On the other side of the station, in a different dormitory, a group of eye cadets were gathered around a computer screen. The eye were in species with hard shells, multiple eyes, and a deep belief that they were superior to all mammals. They saw creatures with fur and warm blood as primitive, emotional, and weak. "Look at them," one eye said, pointing at security footage of the cubs. "The galaxy fears these things, they are just animals." "Dangerous animals," another replied. "The reports say their threat mode is triggered by fear and stress. Their aggression responses are automatic and violent." The first eye clicked his mandibles in what passed for a smile among his kind. "Imagine if we could document an authentic threat response. It would make an excellent xenobiology thesis. We could prove that all mammalian species, even the mighty, are slaves to their primitive instincts." "How would we trigger such a response?" "Simple, we wait until the observation nursery has minimal supervision. Then we introduce controlled stimuli, lights, sounds, minor physical contact. We record everything." The other eye shifted uncomfortably. "This seems unwise. The ambassador warned us about the cubs." "The ambassador is a mammal protecting his young. Of course he exaggerates the danger." The lead eye stood up, his shell gleaming under the dormitory lights. "Our exoskeletons will protect us. We are not soft like humans or other weak species. What harm can a few cubs do to us?" He looked at his companions with all four of his eyes. "Tonight we do this tonight." None of them noticed the cleaning drone in the corner of their room. None of them knew that, walking her patrol route 3 levels below, had a strange feeling in her stomach that something bad was coming. She looked out a window at the stars and wondered why she suddenly felt afraid. The station was quiet during artificial night. Most cadets were sleeping in their dormitories. The corridors were empty except for the soft hum of cleaning drones and the occasional patrol guard. The lights had dimmed to a gentle blue that mimicked moonlight on Earth, starlight on, and darkness on 100 other worlds. In the observation nursery, the mothers had left their cubs sleeping under the watch of automated systems. The diplomatic meetings would continue early in the morning, and the adults needed rest. The cubs were safe, they believed. The nursery had sensors, cameras, and locked doors. Nothing could go wrong. They were wrong. 4 eye cadets moved through the corridors like shadows. Their hard shells made soft clicking sounds on the metal floor, but they had chosen a route far from any patrol guards. They carried equipment bags filled with lights, sound generators, and recording devices. Their multiple eyes reflected the dim blue glow of the corridor lights. "The security codes were easy to obtain," the lead eye whispered. His name was Al, and he was in his final year at the academy. He believed himself to be brilliant. He believed mammals were stupid. He believed that nothing bad could happen to him because he was simply too smart for bad things. This belief would soon be tested. The group reached the nursery doors. Al entered the security code he had stolen from the system, and the doors slid open with a soft hiss. The 4 cadets stepped inside. The nursery was dark except for small lights along the floor. In the center of the room, 5 cubs lay curled together in a sleeping pile. Their small bodies rose and fell with peaceful breaths. Their fur looked soft and harmless in the dim light. "They look almost cute," one of the eyes said, "for mammals." "Focus," Al ordered. "Set up the equipment. We need to document everything for our thesis." The cadets spread out around the room, placing cameras and sensors at different angles. Al pulled out a light projector and aimed it at the sleeping cubs. His companion activated a sound generator. "Ready?" Al asked. The others nodded. He pressed the button. A flash of bright white light exploded across the room. At the same moment, a sharp clicking sound burst from the speakers at high volume. The combination was designed to shock, to frighten, to trigger a response. It worked. The cubs woke instantly. Their eyes snapped open, and for one terrible second, words from earlier could be heard in the universe's memory. A frightened cub is a killing cub. The gold-striped leader was the first to react. His soft brown eyes turned completely black as his pupils expanded to cover everything. His fur rose along his spine. His claws extended, and even in the dim light, the eye could see liquid venom dripping from their tips. He growled. It was not the tiny, cute growl of a playing cub. It was a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through the floor and into the bones of everyone in the room. His siblings joined him. 5 cubs, all in threat mode, spread out in a hunting formation that was written into their blood by millions of years of evolution. "Excellent," Al said, still recording. "This is exactly what we needed. See how they coordinate. This is pure instinct, primitive mammalian behavior that." The gold-striped cub lunged. He moved faster than anything the eye had ever seen. One moment he was 10 meters away. The next moment he was on Al's chest, his venomous claws slashing through the gaps in the eye's exoskeleton. Green hemolymph sprayed across the room. Al screamed. The other cubs attacked. They targeted joints, soft spots, anywhere the eye shells did not protect. Another cadet went down, clutching his leg where a cub had torn through his knee joint. A third was knocked against the wall, a cub's teeth sinking into his arm. "Run," someone shouted. They tried. They ran toward the door. But the nursery's automated systems had detected the attack. Emergency protocols activated. The doors sealed shut with a heavy clang. Red warning lights began to flash along the walls. The 4 eye cadets were trapped inside with 5 angry, frightened, venomous predator cubs. "Help us," Al screamed into his communicator. Green blood was pouring from his chest. The venom was already spreading through his system, making his limbs feel heavy and cold. "Someone help us." The cubs circled them. The gold-striped leader stood in front, his black eyes fixed on the bleeding insects. He was no longer just a cub. He was a predator protecting his pack from threats. He was a million years of evolution compressed into a small, furry body. He was death. On the other side of the station, alarms began to sound. Was ending her shift when her communicator buzzed with an emergency alert. She looked at the screen and felt her blood turn to ice. Nursery lockdown, multiple casualties, cubs in threat mode. She started running. Other security personnel were responding, but they were scattered across the station. The nearest team was 7 minutes away. The parents were being woken, but they were on the far side of 9. They could not arrive in time. Reached the observation corridor in less than 2 minutes. Through the large window, she could see everything. 4 eye cadets were huddled in a corner, bleeding and terrified. 3 of them were badly wounded. The 4th was trying to protect the others with his body, but his shell was cracked and his movements were slow. 5 cubs stood between them and the door. The gold-striped leader paced back and forth, growling with every step. His siblings watched the eye with hungry, black eyes. They were scared. They were confused, and scared, confused cubs only knew one way to respond. "Attack, kill, survive." "Security team en route," her communicator crackled. "ETA 7 minutes. All personnel hold position and do not engage." 7 minutes. Watched the cubs circle closer to the bleeding cadets. She watched Al try to crawl away, only for a cub to slash at his legs, forcing him back. She watched the eye who was still standing slowly lose his strength as venom spread through his body. They would not survive 7 minutes. Looked at the door controls. She had the security codes. She could open the door and go inside. But what then? She had no weapons that could stop a cub. She had no armor that could protect against their venom. She was just a human. Soft skin, no claws, no natural defenses. Every rational thought told her to wait. Let security handle it. Let the professionals deal with the situation. Going inside would be suicide. But through the window, she watched the gold-striped cub that had pressed his paw against the glass just hours ago. She watched him growl and slash at the air. She watched him tremble with fear and confusion, surrounded by strange smells and flashing lights and screaming insects. He was not a monster, he was a scared child. Made her decision. She walked to the door controls and entered her security code. Behind her, her communicator exploded with shouting voices. "Cadets, stand down. Do not open that door. That is a direct order." She ignored them all. The door slid open and stepped inside. The nursery door sealed shut behind her with a sound like a closing coffin. 5 pairs of black eyes turned to look at her. 5 sets of venomous claws gleamed in the red emergency lights. 5 frightened, dangerous cubs began to move toward her. In the corner, the wounded eye watched in horror. "Human," Al gasped through his pain. "Run, you cannot help us, run." Did not run. She stood perfectly still in the middle of the room, and she began to breathe slowly, calmly, as if she had all the time in the world. The gold-striped cub was 3 meters away and closing. His growl filled the room like thunder. Outside the window, a security officer watched through binoculars and whispered a single word. Impossible. The nursery smelled like blood and fear. Green eye hemolymph mixed with the sharp chemical scent of venom. The red emergency lights painted everything in shades of danger, and in the center of it all stood alone. The gold-striped cub was the first to approach her. He moved slowly now, not lunging like he had with the eye. He was confused. This new creature had walked into the danger instead of away from it. She did not smell like the insects. She did not make loud sounds or flash bright lights. She simply stood there, breathing. Watched him come closer. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to move, to fight, to flee. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her hands wanted to shake, but she forced them to stay still at her sides. She knew something that the eye had not understood. The cubs were not attacking because they were evil or hungry. They were attacking because they were terrified. Someone had invaded their sleeping space. Someone had hurt their senses with lights and sounds. Their threat mode was not aggression. It was fear turned outward. And fear could not be defeated with more fear. She dropped to her knees. The movement made the cubs freeze. The gold-striped leader stopped 2 meters away, his black eyes fixed on her. His siblings spread out around her, cutting off any escape. She was surrounded by 5 small predators, each one capable of killing her in seconds. Lowered her head, she did not look at the cubs directly. She made herself small, unthreatening, submissive. She pressed her palms flat against the floor. In the corner, Al watched with dimming eyes. The venom was spreading through his body, shutting down his organs one by one. He did not understand what the human was doing. He only knew that he was dying and that nothing could save him now. "Human," he whispered, "what are you doing?" Did not answer him. Her focus was entirely on the cubs. She began to hum. It was a simple melody, low and soft. Her grandmother had sung it to her when she was a child, back on Earth in a small house surrounded by mountains. It was a lullaby about the moon and the stars and sleeping safe through the night. It had no words in any galactic language. It was just sound, just comfort. The gold-striped cub tilted his head. His growl faltered, breaking into something uncertain. He had never heard a sound like this before. It was low, like his mother's calming rumble, but different. Warmer, softer. He took a step closer. Kept humming. She slowly raised one hand, palm facing upward, and held it in the space between them. An offering, an invitation. The cub sniffed the air. The human did not smell like fear. Every other creature he had encountered during threat mode had been drowning in the chemical stink of terror. But this one was different. Her scent was strange but calm. Her heartbeat was fast but steady. She was afraid, he could tell that much, but she was not letting the fear control her. This was something new, something the cub did not understand. He stepped closer still. His nose was almost touching her palm. Outside the nursery window, security officers had gathered. They watched through the glass with expressions of disbelief. Commander Al was shouting into his communicator, demanding updates, demanding someone explain what was happening. A medical team was standing by, but no one dared to open the door. "She is going to die," one officer said quietly. "No," another replied, watching closely. "Look at the cubs, they are not attacking." It was true. The 4 other cubs had stopped circling. They stood in a loose ring around, their black eyes watching, but their bodies no longer tensed for combat. The gold-striped leader was the closest, his nose now pressed against his palm, inhaling deeply. Slowly turned her hand and touched the side of his muzzle. The cub flinched. Every muscle in his body went rigid. For one terrible heartbeat, thought she had made a mistake. She thought he would bite her hand off at the wrist and tear out her throat before she could scream. But he did not. The cub stood frozen, his black eyes staring at her. No one had ever touched him like this during threat mode. The touch was gentle. It was warm. It reminded him of something, some deep memory buried in his blood. His mother's tongue cleaning his fur. His siblings pressing close during sleep. Safety, pack, family. Kept humming. She stroked his muzzle slowly, carefully. She could feel the tension in his body beginning to ease. His fur, which had been standing on end, began to flatten. His claws, still extended and dripping venom, slowly retracted into their sheaths. "Good boy," she whispered. "Good boy, you are safe. No one is going to hurt you." The cub did not understand her words, but he understood her tone. He understood the steady rhythm of her heartbeat so close to his ear. He understood the warmth of her hand on his face. The blackness in his eyes began to fade. Brown started to appear around the edges, pushing the darkness away. He was coming out of threat mode, slowly, carefully, like a drowning creature finding the surface. He made a sound, not a growl, something softer, something smaller. A chirp like the sound cubs make when they are safe with their mothers. The other cubs heard it. They looked at their leader, confused. He was not attacking. He was not afraid. He was standing with the strange creature, making sounds of comfort. One by one, they began to approach. Stayed on her knees, her hand still on the gold-striped cub's muzzle, her voice still humming the old lullaby. A second cub came close and sniffed her knee. She reached out with her other hand and touched its head gently. A third cub pressed against her back. A fourth sat down beside her, its black eyes fading to brown. The fifth, the smallest of the group, climbed into her lap and curled up like a cat. Surrounded by 5 cubs, kept humming. In the corner, Al watched through fading vision. His mind could not process what he was seeing. The cubs should have killed her. They should have torn her apart like they had attacked his group. But instead they were gathered around her like she was one of them, like she was pack. "How," he whispered. It was his last word before he lost consciousness. Outside the window, the security officers stood in stunned silence. Commander Al had stopped shouting. The medical team had stopped preparing for the worst. Everyone simply watched. The human cadet was sitting in the middle of 5 cubs. Her lullaby filled the room, drowning out the hum of the emergency lights. The cubs' eyes were brown again, soft and curious instead of black and deadly. Their fur was smooth. Their claws were hidden. They looked like sleeping children gathered around their mother. "Get me the ambassador," Commander Al finally said. His voice was strange, filled with an emotion he could not name. "Get me the ambassador right now. He needs to see this." Did not know how long she sat there. Minutes, maybe. It felt like hours. Her legs went numb. Her throat grew tired from humming, but she did not stop. She did not move. The gold-striped cub had pressed his whole body against her side. His head rested on her thigh and his eyes were half closed. He was purring, she realized. A deep, rumbling vibration that she could feel through her whole body. She had never heard a purr before. She did not know if anyone outside of families had ever heard it. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever experienced. Then the nursery doors exploded inward and the parents arrived. The mothers came through the broken doors like a storm made of fur and fangs. They were in full war form, their bodies transformed by rage and protective instinct. Their fur stood on end, making them look twice their normal size. Their eyes were pure black. Their claws were extended, dripping venom that sizzled when it hit the floor. Behind them came the ambassador and his guards, equally terrifying, equally ready to kill anything that had threatened their young. Did not move. She sat perfectly still with the cubs around her, her hand resting on the gold-striped leader's back. She knew that any sudden movement might trigger an attack. She also knew that trying to run from an angry parent was impossible. They were faster, stronger, and deadlier than anything she could imagine. So she stayed where she was and kept humming. The lead mother stopped 5 meters away. Her black eyes swept across the room, taking in everything. The wounded eye in the corner, the blood on the floor, the equipment scattered around the nursery, and in the center of it all, a human female sitting peacefully with 5 cubs gathered around her like flowers around a sun. The mother's war form flickered. Confusion passed through her black eyes. "What is this?" she growled. Her voice was deep and dangerous, barely controlled. Spoke softly, never stopping her gentle strokes on the gold-striped cub's back. "Your children were frightened. Those cadets came in with lights and loud sounds. They scared the cubs into threat mode." "And you," the mother took a step closer. "Why are you here? Why are you touching my children?" "Because they needed someone to tell them they were safe." The answer hung in the air like smoke. The mother stared at with eyes that were slowly changing from black to gold. She did not understand. No creature outside of packs would willingly approach cubs in threat mode. No creature would risk death to comfort children that were not their own. The gold-striped cub lifted his head and looked at his mother. He chirped softly, the sound of a happy cub greeting a parent. Then he pressed closer against his side and closed his eyes again. The mother's war form collapsed, her fur flattened, her claws retracted. Her eyes turned fully gold, wide with an emotion she had not felt in many years. Shock, wonder, and something else, something like recognition. "You calmed them," she whispered. You brought them out of threat mode. I just hummed to them, said, and touched them gently, that is all. The ambassador pushed through the group of adults. He was the largest in the room, his silver-streaked fur marking him as the eldest and most powerful. He looked at with eyes that had seen 1,000 battles and 1,000 more deaths. Then he looked at his, sleeping peacefully around this strange human creature. How, he asked, his voice was quiet, almost gentle. How did you do this? Thought about the question. She did not have a scientific answer, she did not have a strategic explanation. She only had the truth. When I was a child, she said, I was scared of many things, the dark, loud sounds, being alone. My grandmother would come to me and hold me close. She would hum songs to me. She would kiss my forehead and tell me that everything was going to be all right. She looked down at the gold-striped cub, still pressed against her side. Your cubs were scared. They needed what all scared children need: comfort, safety, love. The ambassador was silent for a long moment. Then he said something in the language, a phrase that did not understand, but that made all the adults in the room go very still. What did he say? Asked. One of the mothers answered, her voice filled with wonder. He said that you know the old ways, the ways that we teach only within our packs, the ways that outsiders should not know. Shook her head. I do not know your ways, I only know what my grandmother taught me. Show me, the ambassador said. Show me exactly what you did. Hesitated, the cubs were calm now, almost asleep. She did not want to disturb them, but something in the ambassador's eyes told her this was important. This was more than curiosity. She looked down at the gold-striped cub. He opened his eyes and looked back at her, his gaze soft and trusting. Slowly, carefully leaned forward. She pressed her lips against the cub's forehead. A kiss, gentle and warm, the same thing her grandmother had done 1,000 times. The same thing human parents did with their children across every continent on Earth. A simple gesture of love and protection. The cub made a sound she had never heard before. A deep, vibrating hum that resonated through his whole body and into hers. His eyes closed, and his entire form relaxed into complete peace. The adults made sounds of their own, gasps, whispers. The mothers were pressing their hands against their mouths. The guards had dropped their weapons. Even the ambassador looked shaken, his golden eyes wide. That is not possible, one mother whispered. She cannot know, another said. No off has ever known. The ambassador raised a hand, silencing them all. He walked forward slowly, his massive form casting a shadow over and the cubs. He stopped just in front of her and lowered himself to the ground until his eyes were level with hers. What you just did, he said quietly, is called the Eth in our language. It means soul touch. It is our most sacred bonding ritual passed down through generations since before we had language. Parents do it with their children. Mates do it with each other. It is how we tell our loved ones that they are safe, that they are protected, that they belong to our pack. His heart was pounding. I did not know. I am sorry if I have offended. You have not offended, the ambassador interrupted. You have amazed. He looked at the cubs gathered around her. In all my years, I have never seen a creature outside our species perform the Eth. I have never seen it work on cubs who are not blood relatives. Yet here you are, a human, and I have accepted you as pack. He reached out with one massive paw and touched its cheek gently. It was a gesture so careful, so tender, that it seemed impossible from a creature so large and dangerous. How, he asked again, how does a human know what we know? Thought about it, she thought about her grandmother's hands, rough from years of work but gentle when they held her. She thought about lullabies sung in dark rooms. She thought about forehead kisses that made nightmares go away. Maybe, she said slowly, your people and mine are not as different as the galaxy believes. Maybe somewhere long ago we learned the same lessons, that children need comfort, that fear needs gentleness, that love is a language that does not need words. The ambassador stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something that made every in the room gasp. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers. Pack friend, he said. From this moment you are pack friend, you and your descendants for all generations. The Dominion will remember what you did here tonight. Did not know what to say. Tears were forming in her eyes, and she did not try to stop them. Around her the cubs stirred, pressing closer, sharing their warmth. In the corner, the medical team was finally working on the wounded eye. Al was alive, barely, his body fighting the venom with the help of antitoxins. He would survive to face the consequences of his actions. But that was a matter for later. Right now, in this moment, sat in a room full of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, and she had never felt more safe. 3 days passed after the incident in the nursery. The cadets survived, though they would carry scars for the rest of their lives. Al lost the use of one arm where the venom had damaged his nerves. The others faced similar injuries, but the physical wounds were nothing compared to what waited for them. They were expelled from the academy. Their research project was destroyed. Their families were informed of their actions, and the government, embarrassed by the behavior of their young ones, sent formal apologies to both the Dominion and the Galactic Coalition. The diplomatic meetings continued as planned, but everyone on Station 9 knew that something had changed. Something important had happened in that nursery, and the story was spreading across the station like fire. Tried to return to her normal duties. She walked her patrol routes. She attended her training sessions. She ate her meals in the cadet cafeteria, but nothing was normal anymore. Everywhere she went, people stared at her, some with curiosity, some with disbelief, some with something that looked almost like fear. She was the human who had walked into a room full of cubs in threat mode. She was the human who had kissed their foreheads and turned screams into silence. She was, according to the whispers, either the bravest person on the station or the craziest. On the 4th day, she was summoned to the ambassador's private quarters. The room was large and warm, decorated with items from the furs covered the floors and walls. Weapons hung on display, ancient and beautiful. The lighting was dim and golden, like sunset on a world had never seen. The ambassador sat on a raised platform, and around him 5 cubs played on the soft furs. The gold-striped leader saw enter and immediately bounded toward her, his tail wagging with excitement. He jumped against her legs, chirping happily, and she laughed as she knelt down to embrace him. "He has not stopped talking about you," the ambassador said. There was warmth in his voice, a softness that had not heard before. "In our language, he calls you Warm Sound Mother. It is the name cubs give to those who comfort them." Stroked the cub's fur, feeling the vibration of his purr against her hands. "I am honored." "You should be. It is a title that carries great weight among our people." The ambassador gestured for her to come closer. "Sit with me, we have much to discuss." She walked across the fur-covered floor and sat on a cushion near the platform. The other cubs followed her, gathering around her feet like she was their second son. She did not push them away. "I have spoken with my council," the ambassador said. "We have debated what happened in the nursery. Some say it was luck, some say it was instinct, some say it was the will of the universe putting the right soul in the right place at the right moment." He paused. "I believe it was something simpler than all of those things." "What do you believe?" asked. "I believe that humans carry something inside them that most species in the galaxy have lost. You call it many things: empathy, compassion, kindness. We had a word for it once long ago before we became warriors and conquerors. We called it Sira. It means the fire that warms without burning." He leaned forward, his golden eyes fixed on her face. "Most species evolve away from this fire. They become cold, logical, efficient. They see warmth as weakness. They see kindness as a flaw to be eliminated. The are like this. Many others are like this." He shook his head slowly. "But not humans. Your species has held onto the fire. You have made it your strength instead of your weakness." Thought about Earth. She thought about the billions of humans living their lives, loving their families, comforting their children. She thought about all the small acts of kindness that happened every day without anyone noticing. A mother singing to her baby, a father carrying his tired child, a stranger helping someone who had fallen. "We are not perfect," she said. "Humans have done terrible things to each other. We have wars, we have cruelty, we have darkness." "All species have darkness," the ambassador replied. "The difference is what you do with the light, and your species has more light than you know." He stood up, his massive form towering over her, but there was nothing threatening about him now. He looked almost gentle. "Tomorrow, there will be a ceremony in the main assembly hall. The Dominion wishes to honor you publicly. You will be granted the title of Pack Friend before the entire station. It is a rank that has not been given to an Orphan over 200 years. His breath caught in her throat. "Ambassador, I do not deserve." "You walked into death to comfort frightened children," he interrupted. "You did not know if you would survive. You did not care. You only knew that they needed help and you gave it." He placed a massive paw on her shoulder. "That is exactly what a pack friend would do. That is exactly what you deserve." The ceremony was held the next morning. The main assembly hall was packed with cadets and officers from every species on the station. Humans, and dozens of others filled the seats and lined the walls. Holographic cameras recorded everything for broadcast across the galaxy. Stood on the central platform, wearing a formal cadet uniform that she had been given just hours ago. Her heart was racing, but she kept her face calm. She had faced worse than a crowd. The ambassador stood beside her, dressed in ceremonial robes that marked him as a leader of his people. Behind him, his family gathered. The mothers, the guards, and of course, the 5 cubs who had refused to stay behind. The gold-striped cub sat at its feet, his tail wrapped around her ankle. He would not leave her side. "Citizens of the Galactic Coalition," the ambassador said, his voice carrying across the hall. "4 days ago, a disaster nearly occurred on this station. We were attacked by those who should have known better. They were frightened into a state that has killed many before." The crowd was silent. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone had heard the stories. But one person did not run. One person did not hide. One person walked into danger not with weapons, but with warmth, not with force, but with kindness. He turned to look at. This human did what no one in this galaxy thought possible. She calmed me with nothing but her voice and her touch. She performed our most sacred ritual without ever being taught. She showed us that the universe still holds wonders we do not understand. He reached into his robes and pulled out a small object. It was a pendant made of dark metal, shaped like a paw print with a single gem in the center. The gem glowed with inner light, shifting through colors like a living flame. The ambassador said formally, "I name you Pack Friend of the Dominion. You are family. Your enemies are our enemies. Your children will be our children. From this day until the stars grow cold, you belong to us and we belong to you." He placed the pendant around her neck. The gem pulsed warmly against her skin. Looked out at the crowd. She saw humans smiling with pride. She saw nodding with respect. She even saw some eye looking at her with expressions that might have been shame. And she saw the gold-striped cub looking up at her with those soft brown eyes, his tail still wrapped around her ankle. She knelt down and pressed her forehead against his. "Pack," she whispered. He purred in response. Later, when the ceremony was over and the crowds had dispersed, sat alone on an observation deck. She watched the stars through the massive windows, thinking about everything that had happened. Her communicator buzzed, a message from her grandmother on Earth, who had somehow heard the news across the vast distances of space. "My little," the message said, "I always knew you would do great things, but this is more than I ever dreamed. You showed the galaxy what I always knew. That kindness is the strongest thing there is. I love you, my child. I am so proud." Wiped tears from her eyes and smiled. Somewhere across the galaxy, beings of 100 different species were telling the same story. The story of a human who walked into death and brought peace instead. The story of a forehead kiss that stopped a massacre. The story of a cadet who proved that the softest hearts can be the bravest hearts. And in the quiet corridors of Station 9, creatures whispered a question they had asked about humans many times before. Are they brave or are they foolish? The ambassador, walking past with his, heard the question. He stopped and looked at the ones who had asked it. "They are kind," he said simply, "and the galaxy has forgotten how dangerous kindness can be." He continued walking, 5 cubs bouncing around his legs, and a gold-striped leader pausing to look back at the stars. Somewhere out there, a human was watching the same stars. And she was smiling,